friends, and welcome to this full build of Tamiya's 1/48 scale F4U-1 Corsair. This is a classic popular kit from the late 90s, and I must say, after dealing with a few tough kits in terms of fitment issues from the 90s, Hasegawa here's looking at you, this was a pleasant surprise and an absolute joy to build. In terms of accessories, I've got some internal etch from Edward, as well as Edward masks for the Canopy. And this is my first time trying out Quinta Studios 3D decals. They seem to be the cream of the crop of this new trend of what I think is resin 3D printed decals, and should be interesting to see how they work. So, as is often the case with detail accessories for interiors, I'm shaving some of the details away from the cockpit area as I assemble these pieces. So along with the cockpit, I'm also assembling various parts of the airframe that require the green undercoat for this plane, which was in terms of Vallejo color, it's called light chromic green. So up until this point in my brief modeling career, I've been struggling a little mixing my primers from Vallejo in terms of getting thinner ratios correct for airbrushing. So simply for convenience, I'm using Tamiya's semi-gloss black as a primer on this job, just to see how it goes. And it certainly was very convenient. And now it's time to spray that light green chromate. I'm also for the first time using Vallejo's new Airbrush Flow Improver, and it really isn't necessary with Vallejo's Model Air products, besides a few that are a bit heavy and dry quickly. It's best really to use it sparingly because you can very quickly end up with overly thinned paint, which is an absolute pain in the butt to airbrush. As I spray here, I'm trying to create some natural, what in 3D terms I would call ambient occlusion. So where the light falls, gets a full spray of the green, and I'm leaving the corners a little darker, which just creates some natural shading. In preparation for the decals, I'm going to apply a semi-gloss coat, just to seal all this work in. And at long last, it's time to use Quinta's 3D decals. So these guys go into water as any decals would. The major difference is they require a little help in terms of adhesive. So I'm using MIG's Ultra Glue, which is transparent when it dries and is water soluble, to help these guys adhere to the surface. So I must say I'm pretty impressed with these decals. They're definitely a lot quicker and easier to apply than the edge sets I normally buy. While I'm at it, I'm also going to dry brush some details with Vallejo steel. With the cockpit done, it's time to start assembling the rest of the model. So this was my one big mistake with this model. I put the support in upside down, which was quite a big problem because I had to undo all this work. I didn't film this because I was grumpy, but it did happen, and you can see a little bit of damage when I put the wings on. So now it's being corrected. I had to rip that section out and put it back in, and you can see the wings a little bit flimsy due to that correction. So I'm using super glue just to make sure we have a nice strong bond. While that dries, I'm going to get some of the metallic parts sprayed. I should mention at this stage that I often see in researching this build, it was very evident how really good modelers out there love to add tons of detail to the engine. Now, my game plan is to do this plane again in 132 scale. In fact, Tamiya's 132 scale kit, and that's when I'll maximize detail around the engine. This is more of an exploratory build to understand the plane, its structure, and its paint scheme. Thank goodness I had masks for this one. These old World War II fighters have so many separate panes of glass in their canopies. It would have taken forever to mask all this detail manually with fine tape. Inevitably, it's time to do some filling. Now, this is a really good kit, and the only major filling is where I screwed up a bit with the wings. Once that's done, you'll see I create a thinner Vallejo plastic putty solution, and I quickly run that around some of the gaps. And again, this is just mixing some water with the putty, running it through some of the joins just to take the edge off. Now it's time to mask and protect this interior and all the green chromate areas. Now I mask much like I wrap Christmas gifts. It's ugly, but it's effective. Up to now, I've been pretty impressed with Vallejo's metallic paint, and here you'll see I paint the Airframe using Tamiya's semi-gloss black as an undercoat, and then Vallejo's chrome for the Airframe. In my research, I think I would prefer to go with a high gloss black and all clad in the future, and that's what I'm going to be doing for the 132 scale, as well as most metallic frames in future. When I need something a little bit more dull and easy to apply, Vallejo's great, but they don't really have anything that competes in the high shine space. Now I'm painting the chromate green over areas where there might be some worn paint, because this is the first time I'm going to attempt chipping. And I'm not using hairspray, I'm using Vallejo's chipping medium, although apparently you can use hairspray too. This is my first time trying the technique. The idea being, this is when you chip away at the primary paint job, this is the finish that'll be revealed underneath. Vallejo's chipping medium is basically a 50-50 mix with their airbrush thinners. You coat it on as you would in a varnish. And now it's time for starting from the bottom and lighter color up. I'm starting with the Insignia white. I used a bit too much flow improver, so as you can see it's running a bit thin. I had to work slowly and build up layers. When the Insignia white finished, I'm going to mask that off and get ready for the intermediate blue color that comes next. I'm using what we call press stick, also known as tack, to help protect the Insignia white below. Right, now I'm laying down the intermediate blue and giving the whole plane a bit of an overall cover just to get rid of some of that white. And next up, is glossy sea blue, which is a little bit of a transparent paint, so I had to build this up in layers again. Try to be patient. Again, this flow improver caused some very thin runs, which wasn't great. Between coats, I'm going to use the time to further the paint job on the propellers. I'm using the Insignia white to do a white primer for the yellow color. Now, carefully peeling away all this masking is always very rewarding. However, I expected a softer difference between the Insignia white and the intermediate blue. So I'm going to take some white and very carefully build up that softer edge again. Then I'm going to do the reverse and do the intermediate blue from the other side where I may have oversprayed some white. Also, I've just luckily realized at this point I had sprayed the tail the wrong color. Glossy sea blue, it needs to be the intermediate blue. So I quickly corrected that. So let's start chipping. First thing I'm going to do is activate the chipping medium with a layer of water, and then I'm using a scrubbing brush, which is a paintbrush with short, firm bristles, to eat away at the paint. This is very destructive very quickly, so I decided let me rather fine-tune some detail with a toothpick and then eat away at that with the scrubbing brush, both along the line of the scratches as well as then very gently perpendicular to the damage. This is my first time doing it, so it's very experimental, very easy to go too far too quickly. Having said that, I'm relatively happy with the result and invaluable experience for when I attempt this plane in 1/32 scale. Cool, and we're looking pretty good. I'm going to use the opportunity to do some touch-ups. going to remove the masks inside, and I'm using Ultra Glue, which is great for Canopy since it has a transparent finish, to attach that. Now you'll immediately notice the canopies don't have the same wear and tear. So I'm going to use a sponge, just work a little bit of a distress onto the canopy itself and integrate it with the model. Time to seal all this work in again with Tamiya semi-gloss. Now for the first time I'm going to use Tamiya's Mark Fit Strong, which is one solution that basically is used as a set and a solvent. So I apply it to the surface, apply the decal, and immediately it starts dissolving. It starts softening that decal. Then after 5 minutes left to dry, you can apply the solution again. And I must say it works really nicely. Once this decal was a little bit soft, I used a blade just to slice through where the panel lines would be, and one more dose of the solution just to soften that into that crevice. To seal all that work in again with Tamiya semi-gloss. Then I'm going to work up a thin grime paint mixture, which is half thin as half black and brown paint, which dries very quickly, and very delicately going to add some grime layers from the gun turrets and around any areas where oil and soot would build up. Now this is all going to be a base for some oil weathering coming up soon, so we will need to seal it in yet again with that semi-gloss. Now, for weathering, I'm using Uptelling's oils along with the Winsor & Newton white. I've since come to learn the Winsor & Newton has more linseed oil, like traditional oil paints, and therefore it takes a lot longer to dry. In future, I don't think it's actually good practice to mix them because Uptelling doesn't have as much linseed oil and therefore dries much quicker. So when you're mixing, you're then going to slow down the process. So I'm going to brush on some thinners and then apply a little bit of paint and work it in, recreating some oil stains from this cap on top, as well as spots of lighter blue paint that I can wear into the finish, give it some life. So here below I'm using that airbrushed grime as a base for some oil runs, painting the streaks and then using a damp brush with thinners just to spread them down. Pretty happy with that. Now it's time for what should hopefully be the final varnish layer. There's so many already on this plane. For the finish I'm using Vallejo's polyurethane matte finish, which is not that matte. It's a little more like a semi-gloss in my estimation. They do have an ultra matte, which is great if you want something super flat, but I was relatively happy with this finish. While I'm at it, while that dries, I'm applying a wash to some of the smaller parts that need some grime, using airbrush thinners to wipe away excess. Then doing a little bit of a dry brush again, just to add some detail to the bits and pieces. The Canopy has a little bit of damage and some scratches, but it kind of works. The planes themselves were dirty birdies. They picked up a lot of damage. Again, these are all valuable lessons for when I do this model in 1/32 scale. While we close this thing out and I attach all of the endless bits and pieces before we get to the final rigging section, I just want to remind you to check out the Patreon where you can download colorized instructions for this plane, as well as a tutorial on the diorama environment that I created for the reveal at the end. There's also 3D files available to members for the Marsden mats that I've created as well, and I will also be posting Unreal Engine environment tutorials that will illustrate how I create the environment with these reveals. So this is my first time rigging ever. In hindsight, I could have used some finer rigging like Easy Line or something. But it's my first time, again, a lesson for the future, and I'm pretty happy with that. What's interesting is I'm using some CA glue activator, and you can see it magically harden. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you again soon in the next build, and without further ado, here is the reveal.